So, is there an age limit on a PhD degree? This is a question that we often get asked or we think about, and I want to answer that. So, if you don't know me, I am Professor Dave Maslach. I'm an Associate Professor of Innovation Strategy and Entrepreneurship. And I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There's so many people that help me out that I want to pay the favor forward to help you out as much as I possibly can. So this is a question that was asked by USMLE, and he was wondering, or she was wondering, whether they could get a PhD if they're greater than 35 years old, and whether there is an age limit on a PhD degree. So, first of all, if you don't know the rules of this channel, if I do answer one of your questions, you have to go do something random, nice to somebody else, and then leave comments below. Let us all know what you did. It doesn't matter what it is. We're just really curious. That's the name of the game with the whole reciprocity project, as well as the platform that I'm trying to build. All right, so how do you, and what is the age limit here for a PhD degree? So there's not really an age limit, and you do see lots of people that are much older doing a PhD degree. Actually, 35 years old is not that old for a PhD degree. It's actually really common for people in their mid-30s. I would say in a business school, the average is probably about 30 in terms of people starting their PhD degree. That is pretty normal across the board because you do need work experience often. And so you're on the young side if you're 25 years old. You're on the older side. There's not going to be as many people of you doing it if you are upper 30s to 40s. However, it's not uncommon. You do see this actually a fair bit. The thing that you have to worry about, there's not really an age limit per se, but there is a limit on how long it actually takes to get tenure at an institution. And that's what people are sort of worried about when they're doing that. And that's the thing that you should be thinking about. So just imagine it's going to take you about 15 years by the time you actually get tenure. By the time you actually finish your degree, which is 4 or 5 years, by the time you actually work through and actually go, by the time you're tenurable, it's probably another 10 years out from that. And that's kind of like the norm to think about. Sometimes it's quicker and it'll be 10 years from when you start to when you actually get your tenure. But for the most part, it's probably going to be like 15 years. If you're at a really good institution, it's probably 20 by the time you actually get tenure. It's just a really long slog. And so if you think about when you're starting, that's when you're going to get tenure. Now, what you might be thinking about is, well, that sort of prevents me from going into this. Well, not really, right? So that's assuming that you want tenure. And it's not always the case that you actually want tenure or you want to go through the sort of normal tenure track route. And a lot of people that are older, they might not do that, right? They might be 50 years old when they start, and then they realize that they don't want to go through the tenure track, and they go through, they get their PhD and go through administration, for example, or they end up teaching, for example. All those kind of, routes are totally normal, and they're absolutely acceptable. So the teaching route, if you're going to do that and to teach, be more of an instructor, it's challenging because you have to teach a lot of courses and you don't get paid as well for teaching those courses. But it's not, it's not a bad career if that's what your calling is, though, right? Like you're not going to be absolutely impoverished unless you are going in an area that is not as lucrative. And so really look at that, right? Like you're smart enough at this point, and that's the one sort of benefit as you get older. You're smart enough at this point, or, you have experience, wisdom at this point to sort of look back and say, hey, maybe I shouldn't do these things and go into this strategic area. And you can choose whatever those strategic areas are that perhaps is doing the same thing In my belief, I think we all do the same thing in higher education. There's vast differences, but not a lot of differences between them. So you choose the area that you want to go into. And it often depends on the market value and lots of things like that. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that you would never assume, you would never sort of think about. So, yeah, I would not worry about that in terms of your age. In fact, I've got friends at this moment that are over the age of 40 that are doing their PhD, and that is normal. So I'd encourage you to look into it at the very least. I would not be afraid of doing it. The big thing I'd be afraid of is the whole tenure track process, and think about how long that actually takes to get to the moment of when you actually have tenure, and walk through all of that, kind of walk backwards and how realistically how long that's going to take and what it's going to mean. The other thing that you have to be concerned about is if you're going into it sort of cold and you don't have a job lined up before you go and do your PhD at an older date, which I'd recommend for you to kind of investigate and see if you could do that before you do that. Go get your PhD. If you're going into it cold and you're going to, pursue this thing, realize you're probably going to have to move. And so if that is not in if that's not acceptable for your family, that's where you need to have a real big conversation. This is a family decision for you to do this. It's not something that you take lightly. You're going to probably have to move. Everybody has to. It's just part of the process. It's not fun. I moved from another country, and it's challenging to do that, to sort of uproot your life. But if your kids are grown and gone and they've done all that kind of stuff, I mean, maybe it's the time to do that, right? And you have to think about these kind of things and work backwards. Now, are you going to be at the same prestige at the time you're done your career and all that kind of stuff as somebody that did not do that, right? Or they're older? It's probably unlikely that you're going to be at the same prestige, because how you build prestige is through, getting more well-known, writing papers and articles and books and doing all of that kind of stuff. That's how you become prestigious. Now, can you actually get there by starting later on? It's much more unlikely. It's going to be much more harder for you to do that. It's just, it's a numbers game. There is a lot of work that goes on to write these things. You have to realize that it is going to be a slog. So just expect that going in, that it's highly unlikely that you're going to be very prestigious at the end of it, just because of the shorter time that you have in academia. You can, but realistically, I don't think it's possible. I just don't see a lot of people doing that later on in their career and becoming, a very prestigious professor in the field, which, you'd be surprised in how much it actually matters in terms of the status that you get, because it plays with your head and all that kind of stuff, right? So really accept that going into it, and understand what the consequences are of you starting later on in life, right? You're changing a career is really what you're doing, and that has consequences, and that's a really big thing to think about. So with that, hopefully USMLE, give me a thumbs up, by the way, share this video, and go do something nice to other people. All right, take care, and have a wonderful day. Bye.